Hello, my name is George Paris. I'm a PhD chemist. I'm an old PhD chemist. I got my PhD in 1974, and I've been through a wide variety of jobs since that point. The reason I'm making this video, the title of the video is something like, do you really want to go into chemistry as a career? I've got something in my hair, very exciting. In any event, is chemistry really a profession that you want to get into? Now, what I've noticed is there's a variety of YouTube videos out there. These YouTube videos deal with these issues of how to pick a college, how to pick a curriculum, what are your job potential and the economic potentials in these areas, job satisfaction, should you get a PhD, should get a master's, should do a postdoc, all that type of stuff. These are almost all written, by the way, by people who are between the ages of 18 and 25 or 18 and 30 maybe. And so they have not, most of these, I can't think of one that I've seen that actually had actually gone into a career and tried to actually go forward in the career. These are all based of the statistics they provide are provided by the American Chemical Society or the various job related employment statistics for the government, all of which have very little bearing on what you personally will experience. All right. So what I want to do is to break it down a lot more for what you will experience in your career so that you can make a better decision, at least be prepared for what's going to actually happen to you when you get that degree. All right, or when you make that next step of taking that next set of courses or go from a bachelor's to a master's to a PhD to a postdoc or whatever it is you end up doing. Now, I have written some notes which I'm going to rely on heavily. I'm going to bring them up. I don't know if you'll be able to see this or not, but they will show up in my corner of my screen here so I can read them. And I'm going to diverse from them a bit, but please pardon me because I wanted to keep this fairly tight and focus on certain issues that I think are particularly important to you. Let's see if that comes up. Yes, there it is. Let's see, need to start at the beginning. I get interrupted occasionally, phones ring, people walk in, cats go crazy, all kinds of stuff. So please forgive me. I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this because I think you need to know the knowledge. First off, I love chemistry, and you're probably wondering why I would challenge the profession if I happen to love the topic. It's a good thing I love it because it hadn't really been all that great for me. In some cases, it's done well. Other cases, have not done well. Job satisfaction is going to be tied to whether or not you actually like the topic, whether it's interesting to you, exciting, and whether or not you can make money at it and support your family, support a lifestyle you like. All right. Now, there's a certain number of issues that you are not going to be picking up from anybody who has not actually gone through a career in chemistry. I have actually gone through a career in chemistry as opposed to just picking a school, going to a class, etc., etc. Okay, so that's the value, I think, of the video I'm about to give you. First thing I want you to know is that anybody could be a chemist. All right. I've actually brought this topic up to the American Chemical Society, and they assure me that they are protecting the profession by requiring that certified schools, if you have a approved curriculum, then you are certified. Well, I mean, nobody's ever asked me that. Nobody's ever asked me if I went to a ACS certified chemistry program. All right. You need to understand that when you get your bachelor's, master's, PhD, whatever, you're not going to get a letter from the ACS saying, hey, you went through a certified program, you are a real certified official chemist. That doesn't happen. Even if they sent you that letter, even if the American Chemist sent you a letter saying that you were, it would be meaningless. Why? Because it doesn't have the force of law. Okay? When you start looking for a job and start interacting with other professions, what you're going to find is that state law applies to most professions. They are licensed by the states. For example, your medicine people, doctors, engineers, lawyers, plumbing, electricians, home improvement contractors, real estate appraisers, high school chemistry teachers, etc., all have to have a state license and to do that job. And you do not have licenses for any of those jobs after you get your bachelor's or master's or PhD in chemistry. All right. All right. So without a teaching certificate issued by the state, you cannot teach chemistry in high school with a PhD. Okay, no problem. All right, let's go forward. This will come up in a few minutes. The issue here is our profession is not protected legally. Anybody can decide, I'm a chemist today, and legally call themselves a chemist and try to do chemical things. Okay, this protects the profession when you have a license, and it also protects the public. The reason, the rationale is that the public wants to know that they have qualified people doing your electricity. You don't want someone coming in house and electrifying you in such a way that you get electrocuted or your house burns down, right? So you need a licensed professional. Chemists do not have that profession in any way, shape, or form. Okay, second issue. This is an interesting one. You really can't practice chemistry. You can't just go out and start doing chemistry. There are a wide variety of laws and regulations that prevent you from going into your basement, trying to invent a chemical compound, produce it, market it, sell it, distribute it, etc. You just can't do it. Now, you could up until the 60s, but by the 1970s, we have a series of laws. They are the Toxic Substance Control Act, TSCA, TSCA. We have the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, RCRA, RCRA, and there was a modification act called HISWA. Then that was the Hazardous Solid Waste Amendments, okay, for whatever it's worth. The next one you need to know about is the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, CERCLA, also known as Superfund. Then you also need to know something about the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Basically, I think every first-year chemistry student should have a course in the regulation of the chemical industry. You're never going to hear about this in academia, because academia managed to get out from under a lot of this stuff. Now they're affected. You will have a hazardous waste disposal bin in your chemistry labs in college and high school and whatnot, but it really doesn't affect you as a student, as a researcher. Somebody administratively is handling that. But you can't, if you try to become an inventor or manufacturer on your own, you would find yourself in deep trouble. You could go to jail very seriously, and you create all sorts of liability if you break these laws. Now, as an aside, I would mention that big chemical companies are about the only ones who are actually prepared to deal with this. Even if you try to start a business that is regulated under these laws, you're going to find that you have a real problem, because just getting together all the administrative stuff to comply with all the laws is going to be a burden on you that prevents you, unless you're fabulously wealthy to start with, prevents you from starting a small business. This is one of the reasons that large businesses actually tolerate these types of laws and regulations, because it provides them with a playing field in which everybody else is excluded. They're not, they don't have to worry about some guy coming out of left field entering their market. Okay. If you don't know the name William Henry Perkin, I recommend you look him up, especially if you're a graduate student. Look up William Henry Perkin, look at what he did, read his story, and you will never have that situation again. William Henry Perkin is an example of how chemistry at one time was a very entrepreneurial business, but it's not an entrepreneurial business now. Many things stand in the way. Now, another issue is low-hanging fruit has all been taken. There's a tremendous amount of chemical knowledge out there today. And so to get to something more interesting, you probably would need equipment, chemicals, resources that you just are not going to have on a personal level. You're going to end up working for a corporation or academia if you want to do chemical research for the most part. All right. All right, the third thing I'd point out is that with only a BS degree, okay, the jobs that are going to be available to you are boring, and the salaries are driven down by those non-chemists mentioned above. That these are people who are not chemists, but who can pretend to be chemists or who can take chemistry jobs. As an aside, I spent about 9 months at one point working in a routine analytical chemistry laboratory, and I was one of 3 chemists out of about 100 people in this laboratory. Most of them were biologists, social studies majors, whatever, people who couldn't get degrees or couldn't get jobs in their field who ended up working as chemists, and I'll go into that in a minute. Those ACS certified BS degrees that we talked about, they no force of law. In narrow job titles, non-chemists, that would be biologists, English majors, sociologists, etc., can quickly be trained to do rote tasks. Indeed, they are more reliable because they have no inclination to invent or modify protocols. Okay, they follow instructions because they don't know anything else to do. Okay, probably the worst job for a BS chemist is working in a routine regulatory laboratory. Okay. For example, analyzing environmental samples following EPA or FDA protocols that cover technique, chain of custody, quality assurance, quality control, and documentation. In these laboratories, the data generated are essentially legal evidence to ensure compliance with those environmental laws and facilitate enforcement of those laws. Talk about boring, okay? Any deviation from the overall system, that is to say, even something faulty record keeping, you may not do anything wrong, just don't have the right records, can invalidate the results. And any attempt to mask those mistakes that would go unnoticed in an academic environment. Oh, you know, I forgot to write the date down on my notebook. I'll just add it now, whatever. Can't do that. So if you did something like that, that would be considered fraud in this position. And you can go to jail. Chemists have been carried away in handcuffs for not manipulating data, but just reporting it wrong. Okay? So this is something you really got to be concerned about. And it's an incredibly boring job doing the same thing every day for hours on end. The whole economics of these systems, it's a undifferentiated product, and basically it becomes a commodity. Anybody can do it. And every Lab A, Lab B are both following exactly the same rules, doing exactly the same thing, producing exactly the same results. And so it's going to come down to cost. Whether you go to A or B, it's going to be cost. Drives the price down. There's no profit in it. Nobody likes it. Okay? So that's why it's a terrible job. So any bright 20-year-old can be taught how to move the bottles around. Okay? Push the buttons on the machine, move the bottles around, write down the numbers, or let it just record the numbers automatically, and follow the rules. Follow the rules. That's what it's all about. A terrible job. It can be done by any robot, and a lot of it is becoming more and more automated all the time. Now, if you are a PhD or an MS student, you need to know about the demographics of academia. I really got clobbered by this, by the way. My whole generation got clobbered by this. At least all the white males I know about. When I started in chemistry, I had in my mind that I would work hard and might make sacrifices, which I did, in my personal life to obtain a PhD in chemistry and go into academic research. At the time, mid-1960s, Chemistry was still regarded as the foundation of technology development, and it was a very good thing. Better living through chemistry. Chemistry creates a new world. All that sort of. Those were the types of slogans you saw all the time. It was not considered to be an environmental hazard. That changed. Moreover, in the 1960s, there was a steady growth post-World War II in investment in all sorts of technology. So it looked like, the future was very bright. We were all growing. It looked like there's going to be expanding job market. Chemistry would be a great skill to have. So in 1960-65, when I started college, 65, it looked like a great thing to do. There was no reason not to do it. I went to NC State University, 1965, 1969. I went to Georgia Tech, 1969, 1974. However, I should have gotten the message that maybe my profession was not highly needed when I got drafted out of graduate school while I was married into the Army in 1970, and I spent 2 years, 1970 and 1972, in the United States Army. Which, by the way, I'll come back and say something about that later, but that was an interesting experience, and it really didn't, it slowed me down maybe 2 years, but I got my PhD in 74, not a big deal. Now, what I didn't understand, what I never thought about, was that all my professors in graduate school and as an undergraduate were typically American-born, educated white men, and I didn't really think about the fact that most of them were only 10 or 20 years older than I was. Now, that being said, those guys worked until they were in the 70s. They liked their positions. They had good positions. They were making money. They were doing research. They were riding a very good pathway. So if they were say 35 years old in 1975, 85, 95, whatever, they didn't start retiring until the 1990s. So those positions did not open up until the 1990s. That was this post-war boom that they got their degrees in. Most of them had been in school during the war, so they got their degrees after the war and then went into academia. And they had no problems getting jobs. It was perfect for them. But, so these positions are not going to clear out till the 1990s, all right? At which point I would have been in my late 40s, 50s. Another point I'll make here is, I'm just sort of sticking this in, if you're going to go into academia, you probably need to do it before you're 35. Unless you've had a very successful, corporate experience, in which case you may have expertise which a college will want in its collection. If you've had a very successful corporate experience, they may say, hey, you're 45 years old or whatever. We need that expertise. You can come in and go ahead and do your thing. All right. Now, my estimate of the academic faculty in these schools have roughly doubled between 1975 and 2025. Okay. In other words, I think there were about 20 guys teaching chemistry at NC State when I was there. I would say that the faculty is now about 40 to 50 people. By the time I got my degree, however, there were two things happening. The women's movement, let's get women into science, and the civil rights movement, let's get minorities into science, and all these STEM careers. So what we've had over the last roughly 50 years is an environment in which there's been a preference for hiring minorities and females. And now if you look at most of the chemical faculties, you'll find that they're probably about 40% female and about 10% minority. And another group that is surprising is, you remember I stipulated that my faculty was American educated guys. Um, Now there's a substantial number of people from overseas. Some of these are H-1B visa people. Some of them are recruited because we want association with foreign countries. Some of them are recruited because they pay full tuition when they come here, because from China or someplace they're paying full tuition, whereas a lot of American students are not paying full tuition. So it's economically valuable for colleges to have foreign students, and then they progress into professions. So the point is that if you do the math, you'll find that almost every position that's come open, not almost every, but a preponderance of positions that have come open in the last 50 years, the growth, basically all the growth in the faculties, has ended up in women and minorities. The actual number of males, white, Anglo-Saxon, American educated males in these factories is basically the same now as it was 50 years ago. So there's been no growth. That growth I was expecting to happen never happened, as far as I'm concerned. It just basically, people who look like me are declining. And for those of you who are going into this now, what about the future, past 2025? Well, when these women and minorities who've gotten into these positions, they're not going to age out for another 30, 40 years. So they're not going to start falling out. So what's going to happen is the ones that are going to age out are going to be primarily white males that were hired in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They're going to age out. And here's what I think the logic is going to be. It's going to be, okay, we need to have when we hire a person, we need to balance, the demographics. So when this white males retire, they're not going to be automatically replaced by white males. They're going to be split between females and males. And so I would predict that within the next 50 years, you're going to be looking at academic units in college in which the academic faculty is probably going to be 70%, somewhere between 60 and 80% female. And again, over the next, whatever, 50 years, the number of white males in these colleges is not going to increase very much. It's going to be basically the same, even if the number of academic positions increases. So you need to think about that. Now, if you're a female, go for it. You should be in good shape. If you're a male, I think you need to think about that, especially if you're not a minority person. In addition, I mean, there's all sorts, every socioeconomic group that's out there, sexually oriented group, whatever, coming out of the woodwork with their own pressure group. We want all these other groups to be represented in your faculties, and if you don't do that, you're not special. So you could possibly not get your funding, etc. All right, I think about the fifth thing I want to talk about. More of our chemical innovation and manufacturing is moving overseas. The reason for that goes back to the laws that regulate this stuff. Labor's cheaper overseas. Environmental regulations are more flexible. So in chemistry in particular, you're going to have this problem in that a lot of our natural resource-based technology, that would be petroleum, minerals, etc., the pressure is going to be on to move those overseas, and you're going to find that the jobs for those types of positions are going to shrink. Now, we'll still be technological leaders and things like, molecular chemistry. We'll be doing some materials work, carbon nanotubes, stuff like that. But the specialties are going to be much more limited. Okay, finally, couple of points. These are things you're not going to learn in school. First off, if you have a bachelor's degree and don't know what you want to do, what you need to do is to consider the possibility of going into the military. A couple of years in the military would not be a bad thing to do if you don't know what you want to do with your bachelor's degree. You'll learn a lot of skills and get some benefits. GI Bill and stuff like that will help you down the road. And it's not a bad profession to know something about. Turns out that the American military is one of the biggest customers of American technology. So if you know how the military works and what they use and how they think, it doesn't hurt you someplace down the road in your career to try to get material and sell to these people. So if you end up with having to do that, don't worry. I had the same experience. I turned out that actually was useful in getting work as a contractor, etc. Now, some other skills you need to have, and these are the ones that will get you ahead in your profession, are communication skills. You need to be able to write, and you need to be able to talk. If you have problems standing up and giving a presentation, going on YouTube and bearing your soul to people, you really need to overcome that problem. Okay, especially if you ever want to teach, you obviously have to communicate with people. But other skills that you're going to need to know, these are the skills that are going to get you moving up in the corporate world, are marketing, management. When I say management, I mean management of projects, personnel, and money. And you need to couple these with your chemistry knowledge, and you also need to understand the regulatory constraints that chemistry works under in the corporate world. In other words, those laws I mentioned earlier, you're going to need to know something about them. Okay? So that's the long and the short of it. I have just received mail from a mail carrier here, and I will be going off and observing that. But I've tried to be blunt with you and clear with you. If I were if I had a PhD and was thinking about a postdoc because I didn't have a job, I would not take a postdoc unless I thought that postdoctoral position would get me into a academic position. If my goal was to go into academia, do basic research in academia, unless I had some knowledge through, like a mentor or a patron saint or something that was going to get me a job after that postdoc, I probably wouldn't take it. What I would do if I had a PhD and no job, and was able to afford to not be, be out of a job for a while, would be to take an MBA, because the MBA will tend to sharpen your skills about these marketing and management issues. All right, so that marketing and management is what drives careers in outside the academic sphere. If you cannot manage people, if you cannot manage projects, if you cannot manage money, then we live in a capitalist society. You're not very valuable to the corporate people. You're going to be told what to do, and you're going to be, following somebody else's instructions. All right. Well, that's a bit. Have a great day.